Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Amelin. Now I'm going to present the introduction. On 24 February 2022, Russia had invaded the Ukraine in a major escalation of the Russia-Ukrainian war, which began in 2014. The invasion has likely resulted in tens of thousands of deaths on both sides. An estimated of 8 million Ukrainians were displaced within their country by late May, and 7.8 million had fled the country by 8 November 2022. As we all know, the prevention of such suffering and death should be the paramount of the importance. So the reason for the humanitarian intervention to be justified because the international community has a moral duty to protect the common humanity, and because there is a legal obligation codified in international law for states to intervene against the large-scale human rights abuse. So what is humanitarian intervention? It is the use of threat of military force by a state cross international boundaries with the aim of putting an end to the serious and the violation of human rights in a state where the use of force has not been authorized. Next, when humanitarian intervention is necessary, a reasonable response to that question is that the right and obligation of the global community to intervene is activated when a targeted portion of a state general population is falling victim to a systematic violation of their right to life. There is an obligation to intervene when the abuse of human rights by a state or the sub-state actor. Then, who should practice the humanitarian intervention? The two most pertinent considerations surrounding the issue that who should exercise the humanitarian intervention are the legitimacy and the capacity. That is, which actors are capable of intervening in a neutral manner, devoid of self-interest, and which actors are capable of exercising the sufficient force to stop the violation of the human rights and enforce peace. In the present global context, the two best agents for humanitarian intervention are the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO and the United Nations UN. NATO is highly capable of conducting the humanitarian intervention because it possesses a well-established military infrastructure, which allows the organization to intervene with the decisive force, regardless of the strength of the aggressor against it which is intervening. The most important factor in any humanitarian intervention is that the killing is brought to a quick and permanent halt. Then the United Nations is also a legitimate institution for carrying out the humanitarian intervention, although it lacks the capacity to do so when compared to NATO. While the UN Security Council, which with its 5 member states is responsible for the most of the organization's military decisions, the General Assembly also possesses the ability to recommend the military action. Thus, when the UN elects to engage in the humanitarian intervention, the basis for the decision is not grounded in a single state self-interest but on the cosmopolitan consideration.
Next international event. An unnamed threat recently prompted the Trump's resolution calling for humanitarian intervention in Ukraine to be retracted by Russia's representative to the United Nations after it had already been circulated. The resolution demanded that citizens in vulnerable situations be safeguarded and that relief workers get safe passage. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, there are currently more than 2.5 million Ukrainian refugees worldwide. It is undoubtedly preferable to stabilize the situation within Ukraine than to have refugees pour into Poland and other parts of Europe. Experts claim that the fast response from Europe is the biggest demonstration of European mobilization in recent years. The nation has established temporary housing, hospitals, and welcome centers that provide food, information, and medical supplies as part of its preparation. The International Rescue Committee firmly supports the Secretary General of the United Nations' request for civilian protection. It is crucial to uphold the United Nations Charter and adhere to international humanitarian law, which includes safeguarding hospitals and schools. People must be able to move about freely, and humanitarian organizations must have access to those who require their help. At the same time, the international community must be ready for the worst and make sure that aid organizations inside and outside of Ukraine have the resources they require to save life and lessen suffering. The city of Lviv in western Ukraine, which will be designated as an international refuge, might serve as the initial focus of this campaign. Then, on a set schedule, this safe zone will extend into other cities. Humanitarian pause that Russia has suggested could be put into effect to allow people to safely go to safe havens. Refugees will get food, shelter and medical care from the world community after they enter the safety zone. The universally acknowledged principles and good practice of humanitarian donorship will be strictly followed during the humanitarian operation. These include treating others with humanity, impartiality, neutrality, independence from political reasons, and above all, respect for their rights and dignity. Such a large-scale, intricate humanitarian endeavor needs a strong security elements. The military force tasked with securing the humanitarian operation will be given tasks like guarding the safety zone's expanding perimeter, defending Ukraine's airspace, escorting the flights into Ukrainian cities, offering security assistance to the Ukrainian government, and engaging in the full range of military support for humanitarian operations. The safe area will eventually grow to include the whole nation. By doing so, the humanitarian crisis may be resolved and the repatriation of refugees to their homes could start. After that, the international community might help with the reconstruction process and reinstating Ukrainian government control.
Next, we are going to talk about challenges in order to achieve cessation of humanitarian intervention. First challenges is international and domestic rule. International is concerned about behavior and individual act in cross-border consequences. Meanwhile, domestic rule is legislation made by a group of people in a certain country. This become a challenges when lack of criteria in some matter become a limit to the organizational ability to distribute with efficiently, since it may disturb the system. For example, when they want to send some medical aid, such as medical substance or bringing medical assistance to the certain country, will face more restriction since they need to follow some regulation in a certain country. Second challenges they may face is lack of certain points such as media attention, funding and manpower. This point is really play a big role since each of them has their own important points, just as the first of media attention may help a lot since most people will know about this and try their own best to help them. But with a lack of media attention or interest will contribute to the lack of finding, since it will drive away all the attention from the donor as they do not know about this situation. Lack of manpower also happen when not all people interest to join these humanitarian activities. Last challenges is abuse of power. Abuse of power happen when they misuse their power or take advantages when they're supposed to act in their power in any organization. This recently happened when one of the members from United Nations Security Council abused their power when they voting only for their own interest in article by Harman 2017. Also stated that China shield President Bashir with his armed force committed genocide. Another point about this abuse of power is in general by sexual exploitation and abuse by people, stated that sexual abuse happened towards women related with the UN peacekeeper when their job is supposed to protect the civilian.
For the recommendation of humanitarian intervention, so firstly is to protect persons who are no longer participating in the hostilities and restrict the means and methods of warfare. It is the potential solution to protect and sustain healthcare system during the war. It is based on principles of non-interference with medical services in times of armed conflict and civil unrest. It also promotes the freedom for physicians and aid personnel to care for the sick and wounded and to receive care regardless of political affiliation. IHL thereby condemns attacks on and misuse of medical facilities, transport and personnel. States and armed groups have a responsibility to uphold IHL where they have territorial control, including by providing health services or allowing access to alternative health service providers. The next recommendation is provide sufficient of funding and media attention. So according to UNESCO, appropriate funding is also required for the public service system to truly function and serve its audience. The public media system is intended to benefit society in social and cultural ways. As a result, some form of government-managed public funding is justified, as these four main sources of funding for public service media are license fees, government subsidy, advertising revenues, and viewer donation. There is no public media system that is entirely funded by one source. The majority of them use a combination of these four sources. Apart from that, the government should provide sufficient of funding in access to the food and medical aid in achieve the target. For instance, the United Nations World Food Programme is primarily funded by governments. It helps to improve peace conditions in conflict-affected areas and acts as a driving force in efforts to prevent the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict. For the last recommendation is implementing a strict policy of the abuse of power within organization. Power abuse offences are less common in advanced economic and cultural development countries than in less developed countries because of the position of the offenders and their deliberate attempts at subterfuge to conceal the offence. Abuse of power are difficult to uncover and prosecute. This strict policy involves the enforce of the strict punishment such as demerit and impose a fine with a specific amount to stop the beyond or abuse of power among the authority, regulation and revision of conduct rules, imposition of strict penalties without probation or parole for offenders convicted of abuse of power, and implementation of organizational procedures and codes of ethics to encourage responsible behavior in organization.
To conclude all of this, humanitarian intervention can be justified as the above, which is mainly called as a moral duty to protect the civilians without caring about all of culture and religion. Throughout all the years that history, this has happened, and we also lost many lives due to the war. With this humanitarian intervention, it can be either success or failure, which is meant by saving their life. An intervention also considers success if it saved more life than could have been saved without it. At the end, it is difficult to foresee the outcome of any project, but lesson can be gained from past experience and apply for the future one.